This week on the Communicators, Commerce Secretary Carlos Gutierrez on the role the Commerce Department has in technology and telecommunications policy.
Mr. Secretary, welcome to the Communicators.
Pleasure to be here.
For those who don't understand, Mr. Secretary, perhaps, how much influence does the Commerce Department have when it comes to areas like technology or telecommunications policy?
We work very closely with FCC, and obviously we have, within the Commerce Department, we have NTIA, which is very influential and very much part of the process, but we are independent from the FCC, and the FCC is independent from the administration. But we play a role. We play a role, obviously, in policy, and we play a role primarily in technology policy.
Has that always been the case, or is this more acute in your case under your tenure?
I believe that as technology has progressed, we have played an increasing role. It's interesting that, you know, technology had a different meaning if you go back 20 years ago, and today, of course, it's so broad and technology is embedded everywhere. So we work with a lot of different agencies, a lot of different departments, but we do, especially today where technology is so prominent, and unfortunately there are calls for regulations because it is getting bigger, and there is a tendency to believe that the way to solve problems, the way to impact markets is through regulation, and we have had very much the opposite mindset, which we believe has proven out, because the internet has grown substantially, and what we continue to see is that we're leading the world in innovation, which ultimately is what drives jobs and drives our economy.
So is it, in your mind, your job to make sure those avenues of innovation remain open, and are there specific areas that you look at in technology?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that we believe that, and as the President said, that our role is to create an environment so that the private sector and innovators and entrepreneurs can do what they do best, which is to create markets and create new products and create jobs, and that is essentially our role, to create an environment. We don't launch new products, we don't invent new products, and we try to make sure that everybody knows that we don't convince ourselves that we do, and start making regulations that put more power in the hands of the federal government and less power in the hands of entrepreneurs and innovators, which is really what's driven our markets and our society.
When you look down the avenues of technology policy, with the idea of mind, you want to keep those avenues open, is there a certain policy or a certain area that stands out in your mind that I think your administration, you know, deals with on a regular basis?
Well, what we'll be doing, which is a big implementation for us, is the transition to digital TV. That's a big deal. It's a big deal for our country, and it'll put us ahead of many countries, most countries around the world. So on February the 17th, 2009, if you have over-the-air analog transmission, unless you do certain things before, you will go dark and you will not have a television to look at. That's a major policy choice, to make the transition on a nationwide basis to a digital-only TV environment. And in order to do that, we are working with the FCC to send out, we have a coupon program, we have a major communications program. But what I like about that, it's not only policy, but it's actually execution. We are making something happen, and we are doing something that will be a springboard for our country for new innovations, and something that will be long-lasting.
As we get closer to the transition date, how often do you meet with your other counterparts, say at the FCC or in government, as far as how the transition is going? And what do you talk about when you meet?
We are in charge of the coupon program, which is a major part of it. If you have an over-the-air analog TV, one of the things you have to do, one of the options you have, is to request a coupon from Commerce and buy a converter box. And that converter box will allow you to keep your TV set, but make the transition to digital. So that is a major undertaking. We're in charge of that, and I meet with the folks at NTIA who are responsible for the coupon program, I would say a couple times a month, maybe even more frequently than that, just to ensure that it's all on target and that we are executing to the best of our abilities, and that we make sure that the goal is that no one goes dark on February the 17th, that everybody knows what they need to do so that we do this in a smooth way and we all win.
One of the concerns stemming from the coupon program and even a couple of hearings as of late talking about these issues was the amount of time someone has between when they get the coupon and when they redeem a coupon, because if I understand it correctly, there's a time limit.
90 days, which is, you know, I had experience in couponing, given my previous background. I was in a cereal business. So, and 90 days is pretty much the expiration that you have on most coupons. It's long enough to give consumers a chance to think about when they're going to buy and what they're going to buy, but it's short enough to force a decision. And what we've seen is in those 90 days is when you usually get a decision. The longer you wait for a coupon to expire, the less redemptions you get, and after a while consumers just forget.
So it shouldn't be any longer in your mind as far as the redemption date.
It should not be any longer, and 90 days and is enough to give consumers a chance to think about what they want to do, because they have three options. They can get the converter box, they can order a subscription to cable or satellite service, or they can buy a TV with a digital tuner. And those are decisions they need to make. And we now have 1,900 retailers across the country who are carrying converter boxes. There are over 90 converter boxes. So there's plenty of choice and plenty of avenues to be able to solve this specific issue that they may have.
Can I go back to, you said, did you get the idea for 90 days from your experience at Kellogg's?
Well, it was actually came from the folks at NTIA, and it rang a bell and it made sense to me. So, sometimes we meet, sometimes we'll meet twice in a week. Sometimes we'll meet on a daily basis. Sometimes we'll meet every 3 weeks. But I stay very much in touch. We also get a daily report, which tells me how many coupons have been ordered, how the redemptions are going, any complaints that we're getting. But yes, a lot of what we're doing here is similar to what you do in a packaged goods industry.
There were a couple questions also, I think, from one of the legislators. I think it was Chairman Stupak of Oversight Investigations, may have been another, or his work with the Commerce Committee, but about the cost of the program. And I guess there was maybe a request for more money needed as far as the coupon program is that right?
We have, at this point, there's been $1.5 billion allocated to this. And we have appropriated enough for 22 million coupons. We have money for 33 million coupons. So we're within target and we're within plan, and we don't believe we need to request more now. What we need to do is execute. We have a lot of help from the private sector, and about $1 billion of advertising is going in from the private sector to ensure that consumers know that they have to make this choice, they have to make this decision.
How would you rate those private sector efforts?
Very important, very strong. I mean, I've actually seen commercials myself, just flipping through channels, and so the message is out there. We're also working with organizations like AARP, local partnerships, local organizations, mayors' organizations. So we're trying to get as many grassroots organizations behind this effort as possible. This is very important. A lot of households involved, and we don't want consumers to all of a sudden lose contact with their TV set and not know why.
Does your agency have a role in educating the retailers themselves about how they talk to the consumer?
Yes.
And what do you tell them?
Absolutely, and we work very closely with retailers, answer their questions, ensure that they're also in a position to help consumers. Many consumers who happen to have an over-the-air transmission TV, with rabbit ears, and maybe seniors. So they may need some help in just understanding the technology in the converter box. Even though it's extremely simple, they may need the salesperson's help. So we have asked, and we've received good support from these organizations, that their salespeople will be trained, and that they'll be ready to help out whatever they can.
We've had a couple of folks on this issue over the last few months, and especially at the FCC, they'd said that they were going to have people on place come February 17th for the transition. Does Commerce have a role on the specific day as far as having people available to help with it?
Yes. In fact, today we have, our website is up. We have a telephone line. We receive calls. This is a big part of what we're doing because we take this very seriously. We want this to go well. So we'll be manning the phones and responding to emails all the way through. And obviously on the 17th, there may be a new team in place, but this is one of the very important implementation projects that they will have. And we hope that by the time it gets to the 17th, it's pretty much, it's pretty much done.
And as far as you've probably heard from the FCC that they plan a couple of test markets beforehand, Wilmington being one of them.
Yes.
Any role in that will you guys play?
Sure. We'll be, we'll also be helping out the folks in Wilmington if they have questions. If they, our website is up and people use that quite often. They use our phone lines. So we serve as the voice to consumers if they have questions, if they need information. We have the most commonly asked questions on our website, and consumers access that as well.
And that website is?
It's www.commerce.gov is the main website. Within that, there is a link to this digital transition, and I'll get you all the information so that we can post it up. And
one of the things, changing topics a little bit, you addressed the a conference of cable associates and cable operators, and one of the things you talked about during your speech was something called, and it's a little wonky in its term, network management practices, but it goes to the larger issue of broadband in the United States. What were you telling folks there at the NCTA meeting?
The idea was that if you have a service provider who has to give service in turn to their competitors, some people believe that service should be regulated, whether it be AT&T or Verizon, because they may slow down a competitor, they may not give the competitor what that company needs. We believe that there should be transparency with consumers. Consumers should understand what the network provider, how it operates, what the rules of the game are, but we don't believe that we need to get in there and regulate how that market works. We've seen that with transparency, giving consumers choice, and encouraging competition, that is ultimately what regulates a market and what helps a market grow. So the debate now is whether we need to regulate or not regulate. We have been in the position that the less regulation we have, the healthier it will make the marketplace, the more it will grow, the more competition it will attract, and the more choice it will give consumers.
And are there concerns by efforts in Congress to give more regulation in this area?
Oh, yes, yes. There are those who believe that the way to manage this is through regulation. And I think this is an ongoing philosophy, an ongoing debate here in Washington. Regulate or not regulate. And the president has always believed that free markets, less regulation as possible, ultimately is what will create jobs, drive the growth of the economy, and attract competition, which is, we believe, is very important.
I guess there's always, from the other side, the concerns about the ability of content reaching its intended destination, and for those who would want to maybe stifle that content, and stifle is not a good word, but concerns about making sure that content ends up where it needs to be.
And we have laws on the books that look at antitrust activities and anti-competitive activities. So there are laws on the books that enable us to use them when there is anti-competitive activities that consumers or companies believe are happening. The FCC is constantly receiving whether it be complaints or comments, and they can also serve as a regulatory body if need be. So we have the regulations in place. It's a matter of enforcing them and using them. But we've seen that over-regulating a market is the best way to, your word is good, to stifle growth and stifle competition and stifle innovation.
On another front in the broadband world, I think one of the goals of, I guess, the Commerce Department when it comes to broadband is to make sure it gets to more places in the United States. How is that going?
Well, when the president took office, we had about 73% broadband access, and the goal has been universal, affordable broadband access. About 99% of the zip codes have access to broadband, and that's the way it's measured. Obviously, you can get into, does that mean that everyone has it? We know there's work to be done, but we've made a tremendous amount of progress. I mean, in terms of just The number of households that have access to broadband services, the number of households that have access to wireless services. So we believe that we have today one way of measuring it. How far have we come? We have 20% of the world's broadband, but 5% of the population. So we have essentially exceeded most countries' broadband access, and we have work to do. We continue to promote broadband access, and the way to do that is to promote competition. Competition drives down prices. Prices enables more consumers to access, and we know it will continue to grow in the future. This is essentially the communications vehicle of the future.
So that growth, strictly in your mind, depends on the free market. There should be no government intervention.
Right. The free market, the same as all other markets, the same as all other industries, the private sector, private investment, new ideas, new products, that will, on one hand, that will provide an incentive for consumers to be interested, and it will provide an incentive for capital to flow into that market.
There have been, from people who observed this, the issue, they said that one of the things that maybe our nation needs is some type of federal broadband policy. Do we have one?
Well, we have, yes. I mean, what we're talking about in terms of free markets and keep it free of regulation and have a policy that incentivizes capital to flow to the marketplace and have a policy that creates an environment that consumers will be attracted because of the choice they're getting. And that ultimately is, we believe, the way to go. We believe that that is the future. We've been able to keep the internet tax-free, which we also believe is the way to enable it to grow and prosper. But those are constant battles. Those are, constant everyday battles in terms of how we feel about the role of government in a free market.
When you say battle, do you mean with Democrats in general or Republicans? Or what do you mean?
The Congress and the executive branch, and it's the way our democracy works, and it's the way it works in this instance as well.
Do you think the internet will stay tax-free?
We believe it's important that the internet stay tax-free. Taxing something is not the way to help it grow. And the tremendous growth that we've had in internet and the growth of new products, and the new products have helped the internet in turn be more popular. That has happened because it is a free market, and we don't believe that taxes would help.
When you look at the internet's growth, especially as a sales vehicle, do you hear from businesses saying, wait a minute, if someone were coming to my store, I have to charge them certain type of taxes in order to, on top of what I charge for a product? The internet, sometimes you don't get those sales taxes. Are there concerns from businesses that they're losing out on some?
No, I mean, we rarely hear from businesses that they believe taxes are the way to go. I think we've had so much experience in that. And also taxing consumers if they have access, taxing consumers if they order it. That's where we believe that we need to stay away from that.
Our guest on the Communicators this week is Carlos Gutierrez, the Commerce Secretary. Recently, you weighed in on an issue regarding, specifically at the FCC, on the relationship that newspapers have as far as their ability to own broadcast stations. Why did you weigh in on that?
Well, if you think about the way our environment has changed, and as I talk to different newspapers around the country, companies that may own a newspaper, what I hear very often is that their business is under pressure, that their business model is under pressure because consumers are getting news from the internet, they're getting news from different sources. And the newspaper, which was the main source of news decades ago, is less and less achieving that benefit or fulfilling that need. So it makes sense to give these companies the opportunity to diversify. That law that's in place today was put in place in the 1970s, in the mid-70s. So the environment has changed. Today there's more proliferation of companies than ever. And we believe that it's helpful to give these companies the means by which they can diversify, especially because the choices for consumers to receive information has diversified.
Isn't that a free market then approach if the internet is causing such stress at newspaper and companies? Isn't that, I guess, a free market, and that the market has decided who's going to win?
Well, and we should not regulate companies' ability to follow the market. And today what happens is that we have regulated companies' ability to own different media in a marketplace. The argument against it is that that would stifle local news. We don't believe that. We don't. If consumers want local news, they'll have plenty of it. But today, companies are trapped, and if they own a newspaper and they'd like to diversify because they realize they're in the consumer information business, they're in the news business, and that means a different thing than it did 40 years ago, they're somewhat trapped.
Effort in the Senate that would roll back the FCC's decision. House pending a decision. What will happen if the president gets this?
We have recommended that if the legislation goes through, that the president veto it because it's important. And you know, the FCC, what the FCC is recommending is really the 20 largest markets in the country. Mm-hmm. It is very much a measured approach. It's not, you know, opening up the whole market, but it is going in that direction and recognizing that we should be moving with the market. What tends to happen in most markets is that innovation moves a lot faster than our ability to recognize the impact that it's having on a market. And the news business is not what it was 40 years ago because of the tremendous impact of cable and then the internet.
A couple other areas. Sure. One dealing with technology visas, H-1B visas, if I recall correctly. There's been a debate about the amount of visas that get offered a year, especially to those high-tech workers. What role do these workers play in the future of technology, especially when it comes to your department's looking at technology policy?
That's a great question because it gets wrapped up in immigration policy. Mm-hmm. And immigration policy, is, as you know, we believe is one of the big choices that we will have to make that will have an impact not over the next couple of years, but over the next decades and perhaps even the century. We give out 65,000 H-1B visas today. And what we see is that those 65,000 visas are taken up sometimes in a few days, usually in the month of January. So what it tells us is that we don't have enough. We're not giving out enough visas. The history of our country points to that we have always benefited from the greatest minds in the world wanting to come to our country. We saw that in the previous century. We see that today. A lot of the new startups in Silicon Valley, a lot of the new big ideas that have come out of those industries, those companies, have been started by immigrants. And that's not different to our history. It's not different to the way we have grown and evolved. So putting a lid on the number of people who can come and add value to our economy, bring ideas, bring the energy that immigrants bring, we believe it will hurt us. So, and this is all wrapped up in comprehensive immigration reform, which some use as a way of saying this is amnesty, which we do not believe it is amnesty. This is such a complex problem and such a complex opportunity that we think it's unfair to dismiss it with one word. So it's low-skilled, it's high-skilled, but we are a country of immigrants, and we would be making a big mistake, especially in this century, to close ourselves off.
So how would you advise the next administration to pursue this?
Well, talk about immigration reform, you get into the border and the different borders, and we need security, and no one should be apologetic for wanting to secure our borders. That is job number one. Every country in the world has the right and the obligation to secure its borders. So we need to do that. But we can't stop there. That's not the solution. That's not the strategic long-term solution. We need comprehensive immigration reform. that recognizes that there are high-skilled jobs for which we don't have enough graduates, where we do need immigrants to come to our country and continue to add chapters to the immigrant story of our nation. But we also need low-skilled workers who are doing jobs that Americans have moved on from, that they don't want to do anymore. And unless we recognize that, we are going to suffer tremendously over the next years and decades.
Is there a concern that people under the visas come, learn, innovate, but then go back to their countries? And what does that mean for the United States as a whole, as far as the benefit?
Well, it's a good point, because today what happens is we could have students come in and receive the best education in the world in terms of science or mathematicians. And then they can't get a work visa. And many companies recruit on campus, as you know. In the case of student visas, after the student gets a degree, they have to go back home. So it doesn't make much sense to train them and give them the best science that you can get anywhere in the world, and then they have to go back and essentially get a job with a company that may be competing with one of our companies. So that's also wrapped up in this, and that's why we believe we just need to take a thoughtful, strategic approach to this, and not assume that we can compete in this world environment without the help of immigrants.
We have a few minutes left, Mr. Secretary. What would you advise the person who will assume your role as far as the areas of technology and telecommunications policy? What would you tell them from your experience in the role as they look ahead? What kind of advice would you give them?
One is that the speed with which the market is moving is a lot faster than our ability to regulate ahead of innovation. Innovation comes first, and we should let the markets innovate. We should let the markets grow, and we should not be overly eager to regulate markets, especially in technology, where it's moving so quickly. And we just think about how young this market still is, and how recent it is, and how fast it's changing. Regulation could have a dampening effect, which would be, what a shame it would be, that it would not allow our consumers and our country to benefit from the progress that we're making in the area of technology. With our DTV transition, our digital transition, we will free up spectrum. That spectrum will be bought by companies. Those companies will innovate, and they will provide new products, new ideas that we can't even imagine today, that will keep our country in the lead worldwide. It will provide jobs, and it will give consumers products that we couldn't even visualize 10 years ago.
What are your plans for after you finish this position?
Well, you know, I don't have any plans right now, because, you know, you get into, if you start talking to companies, you have to recuse yourself, and there are conflicts of interest, and this job is so engaging that I don't have time to think about what I will do.
Do you see yourself in the business world? You said companies.
I most likely will go back to the private sector. That's what I did for 30 years before coming to government. I will tell you this, I love this. This is the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. I would recommend that whoever can serve. This is the greatest experience I've ever had. And it has changed my life. It has taught me that, that public service and politics do make a difference. Who sits in the Oval Office, and who represents your states, and who represents your district makes a tremendous difference. So no matter what I do, where I go after my service, I will always stay in touch with the public sector and with public service because of the importance.
Carlos Gutierrez currently serves as the Commerce Secretary. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being on the Communicators.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.